I guess I want to preface this by saying that the Netherlands is full of people who are looking for truth and don't know where to find it. I have never met more people who were genuinely good and genuinely wanted to find answers, but were blinded by the craftiness of men than in the Netherlands. It is a country full of people who are trying to be good and do good, and they want to be more good and do more good. But their history can be an obstacle to that. It's a huge obstacle to that, actually. Some things that it helps to be aware of. But don't let this be discouraging. The Netherlands has a very long history of being attacked and conquered by other countries and other nationalities, other cultures. And one of the predominant tools that these other cultures and conquering forces would use to control the Dutch and to keep the Dutch under is religion. Religion was used less as a means to connect to a higher power, and much more as an alternative form of government, particularly with Catholicism. Protestantism became popular and dominant in the Netherlands as a reaction against Catholicism and the control that they tried to hold over the Dutch people. But in a way, Protestantism has kind of become the same thing, but in the other direction. They've been conquered by the Germans. They've been conquered by the Spaniards. They've been conquered by. I'm pretty sure there's a period. Yeah, they were conquered. I can't remember if they were conquered twice by the French. I know at least once by Napoleon. So it's constantly been a cycle of religion as an oppressing factor, and a lot of them look at religion very unkindly as a result. They don't believe that religion is a way to connect to God. They believe that it's a system. And that can make things difficult. That can make things very difficult. Because you can ask a Dutch person, do you believe in God? And they'll say, yeah. And you can ask them, well, do you believe that God has a church on earth? And they'll say, no. And you'll say, well, why not? And they'll say, well, I believe you can worship God in your own way, but I think churches are just set up to keep people under. And that can be very difficult to deal with. There's not some kind of snappy comeback that'll make the Dutch person be like, whoa, you're right. There is a true church. And so it's good to be aware that they're good people with a lot of history behind them that makes their reaction different from what we would expect. I think it's also worth noting there is one temple in the Netherlands. It's relatively new. It's in a town called Zoetermeer or Sweet Lake, which is actually part of Den Haag. So you'll regularly see it referred to as the Hague Temple or the Den Haag Temple. It's small, but it's very pretty. As a missionary, you will have the opportunity to visit that twice a year. No more, unless you reactivate a less active member. That's something they just recently started doing. And if you miss those opportunities because you're late or because of sickness or whatever, they don't really make exceptions. It's a very small temple, so they don't have the capacity or the throughput that Utah temples or American temples have. So make it count. It's beautiful, though. It's a gorgeous temple. And the symbolism behind the temple is absolutely amazing. It's supposed to symbolize the river of fresh water flowing from the temple in Jerusalem to heal the Dead Sea in the very last days, right before Christ comes. And when you see the design of the temple, you'll see it, and it's gorgeous, and I love it. Church meeting houses in the Netherlands are kind of spread out. It's not always intuitive where the church meeting houses are, and the ward boundaries are definitely not always intuitive. And because there are not a ton of members over there, they're not standalone buildings like they are here. They're not buildings specifically made for that purpose, except in very rare occasions. I think I've seen three. I've seen 3 buildings out of the 5 areas I served that were specifically made for church services. The rest were 4. I've seen 4. The rest were repurposed buildings that the church simply rents or has bought and then turns into a church building, which is it's kind of interesting. It can make them hard to find. So if you're going to bring investigators to church, often you'll have to help them find it. If it is a standalone building, because Dutch cities are much smaller than American cities, most people know where it is. It's kind of a landmark. You can be like, oh, do you know the church on the corner of this and that? And they'll be like, oh yeah, the big brick one. And you'll be like, yeah, that's us. And they'll be like, oh, cool. And then you actually have to get them there. But it's pretty cool. It's fun. I've been in a church that was actually a house in World War II where the man would, this is a long story, I'll keep it short. So the man bought a house. In the basement of the house were gas chambers. So he would take Jewish refugees and hide them down there and just keep them safe. He wouldn't gas them. He would just use the gas chambers as a hiding place until the Jewish refugees moved on. And then in this same church building, the Nazis finally found out. They came in, they took over the house, and then they put the chambers to use. So kind of macabre. The services are not held in the basement, but that's a church building. That's a building that we use as a church. Otherwise, sometimes it's just office space. I remember it was a really big deal, like nationwide news big deal, when the church bought a plot of ground and built an American-sized church in Zoetermeer. And comparative to the rest of the buildings, it's enormous. It's absolutely huge. It's built in the traditional horseshoe with the chapel in the middle, recreational hall. It's very standard for a Utah and American church. It's enormous over there. Absolutely, just mind-numbingly large. So that's something to be aware of. The church membership is small over there. A really big and bustling branch has 100+ members, active members. I spent the majority of my time in cities and areas where they had, I don't know. I remember in most of my areas, it was a good day if we broke 35, if we got above 35, which wasn't a bad thing. It was just, there were less people there. Bringing new people to church is a big deal because of that. If you can get an investigator to church, that can go a long way to building member confidence in you as a missionary. And that'll excite the members, and then the work moves faster, which is cool. But the reason it's small is because back when the apostles were doing their work in Europe and conversion numbers were through the roof, they converted a lot of Dutch people. There were a lot of Dutch saints that were very steadfast and very strong in the gospel. Most of those emigrated to Utah. Most of those crossed the ocean and went to Utah with the pioneers. And that's why you'll see a lot of Dutch names. Dutch culture has influenced Utah a significant amount. But that was good for the saints in Utah and good for the church overall. That left the church in the Netherlands in a very weakened, very fledgling state. We don't have a lot of members over there, and we don't have all of the programs that we have in America. Welfare is very hit miss. It's not, we don't have a storehouse over there. We don't have welfare square over there. We don't have employment services over there. If you need help, that goes straight to the bishop, and he decides what can and can't be done. But the members that have stayed over there and that are over there, they have testimonies. They have strong testimonies, and they're deep, and they know it's true because they live in a country where it's not popular to be religious, much less Mormon, and they know why they're doing what they're doing. For the most part, they're very steadfast in what they know to be true. And while that doesn't always extend to actively coming to every single meeting, it does extend to, they know there's a God. They know Joseph Smith was a prophet. They know the Book of Mormon is true. So it's unique, but the people there are very genuine, and it's a pleasure to get to know them and to get to support them in being members of the church. It is genuinely a delight to get to know some of these people. And man, some of the friendships I've made I wouldn't trade for the world. I've got a lot of mission stories, but a lot of them are things that were out of the ordinary, because the stories where things went right and where things were good are so personal and so, I don't know, it was sustaining. It was those confirmations and those moments where the Spirit was there that let me know that the Lord was aware of me and that he loved me and that I was in the right place and doing the right thing. And those are holy to me.